"I would die for you," she whispered to Lakota warrior. His reply left her speechless. She arrived just before sunset when the sky over the plains turned soft orange and purple, stretching endlessly in every direction. The road that led to the reservation was narrow and quiet, bordered by tall grass that moved with the wind like waves. She slowed the car, feeling something heavy settle in her chest. This place felt different, older somehow, as if it remembered things she did not. Her name was Mara. She was in her early 30s, though grief had a way of making time blur. She had come here officially for research, collecting oral histories and cultural notes for a small nonprofit project. Unofficially, she had come because staying where she was had become unbearable. Too many memories, too many silences. Mara had lost someone important the year before, the kind of loss that doesn't announce itself loudly, but stays, quiet and constant, shaping every thought. Since then, she had thrown herself into work, travel, helping others, anything that kept her from sitting alone with her own thoughts. She believed that if she stayed useful, stayed needed, the pain might loosen its grip. The reservation welcomed her, without ceremony. A small sign weathered by years of sun and wind marked the entrance. Beyond it were modest homes, dirt roads, and open land that seemed to breathe. There was no rush here, no noise. "Just space?" She checked into a small guest house run by a local family. The woman who greeted her smiled kindly, asked no unnecessary questions, and handed her a key. That alone made Mara feel seen in a way she hadn't realized she needed. That evening, unable to sit still, Mara went for a walk. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth and grass. She followed a path that led toward a communal area where a few people gathered around a fire pit, talking softly. Laughter drifted, gentle and unforced. She hesitated, unsure if she should approach. Before she could decide, she noticed him. He stood a short distance away from the group, not separate, but not seeking attention either. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with long dark hair tied neatly behind him. His posture was straight, grounded, as if his feet were firmly connected to the land beneath him. He wore simple clothes, nothing dramatic, but there was a quiet authority in the way he carried himself. He was older than her, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s. His face showed lines carved by years of sun and thought. His eyes, dark and steady, seemed to observe everything without judgment. Mara didn't know his name yet, but others did. They greeted him with respect, nodding rather than speaking loudly. He acknowledged them with small gestures, never dominating the space. She felt strangely nervous, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense. It was more like standing near something solid after drifting for too long. One of the elders noticed her and waved her over. "You must be the researcher," the woman said warmly. "Come, sit. You're welcome." Mara joined them, introducing herself, explaining her project in simple terms. She spoke carefully, aware that words mattered here. The group listened politely. Some asked questions. Others simply nodded. The man remained quiet. At one point their eyes met, just briefly, but the moment felt longer than it was. There was no smile, no intensity, just recognition. As if he saw her clearly, without needing explanations. Later, when the fire burned lower and people began to drift away, Mara found herself standing near him, unsure how it happened. "You're far from home," he said at last. His voice was calm, low, measured. "Yes," she replied, "I guess I am." He studied her for a moment, not intrusively, but thoughtfully. "People usually come here looking for something," he said. "History, answers, or peace." She gave a small, tired smile. "I'm not sure which one I'm looking for. That's honest," he said.
Honesty matters. She learned his name then, Thomas Red Cloud.
A Lakota man known in the community for his work teaching young people about discipline, tradition, and responsibility. Some called him a warrior, not because he fought battles, but because he lived by principles that required strength every day. They spoke only a few more words that night. Nothing personal. Nothing heavy. Yet when she returned to her room, Mara realized she felt calmer than she had in months. Over the next few days, their paths crossed naturally at the community center, near the open fields, during small gatherings where stories were shared. Thomas never sought her out, never lingered unnecessarily, but when they spoke, he listened fully, as if nothing else existed in that moment. Mara found herself talking more than she intended about her work, about traveling constantly, about feeling tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. She didn't tell him about her loss, not yet, but she circled around it, speaking of exhaustion, of giving too much, of feeling empty afterward. Thomas didn't interrupt. He didn't offer easy comfort. When he spoke, his words were simple. "You carry more than you should," he said once. She laughed softly. "Everyone says that. Most people don't see it," he replied. "They just see what you give them." That sentence stayed with her. She began to notice things about him, how he treated everyone with the same respect. Children, elders, visitors. How he corrected gently but firmly. How he never raised his voice. His strength was quiet, controlled, rooted. Mara admired that. She had spent years around people who were loud about their importance, dramatic in their emotions, demanding in their needs. Thomas was none of those things. He seemed complete on his own. That made her feel safe. And slowly, without realizing it, she began to attach that sense of safety to him. One afternoon they walked along the edge of the plains. The sky was wide and blue, the wind steady. "Why do you do this work?" she asked. "Teaching. Staying here." T considered the question. "Because if I don't," he said, "someone else will teach them something weaker." She nodded, understanding more than the words alone suggested. She wanted to ask him more personal questions, about his past, his pain. But something told her not to. Boundaries existed for a reason here, and he honored them carefully. That night alone again, Mara wrote in her journal. She admitted something she hadn't said aloud, that she felt herself leaning toward him emotionally. Not romantically exactly, but dependently. She recognized the pattern. When someone offered steadiness, she gave everything in return. Loyalty, devotion, herself. She told herself to be careful. But grief makes people hungry, and hunger dulls caution. By the end of the week, Mara felt as though this place and this man were slowly stitching her back together. She didn't yet understand that healing built on another person's strength alone could never last. She only knew that for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely lost. The days began to settle into a quiet rhythm. Mara woke early each morning to the sound of wind moving through grass and birds calling from far away. There were no sirens, no crowded streets, no pressure to rush. For the first time in a long while, her body seemed to slow down. Even if her mind still carried old worries, her work started gently. She met with elders who shared memories, stories passed down through generations. She recorded carefully, always asking permission, always listening more than she spoke. The people were patient with her. They did not test her or overwhelm her. They seemed to sense she was fragile in a way that had nothing to do with weakness. Thomas was often nearby, though never hovering. Sometimes he helped organize meetings. Sometimes he stood quietly at the edge of her room, arms crossed, watching the younger ones listen. Mara noticed how children behaved differently when he was present. They didn't act afraid. They acted focused. One afternoon, she watched him teach a group of teenagers near the open field. He showed them how to stand straight, how to breathe steadily, how to listen before speaking. His instructions were short and clear. No long lectures, no harsh words. "Strength isn't loud," he said at one point. "If you need to shout, you've already lost control." The words struck Mara deeply. She thought about all the times she had mistaken intensity for strength, urgency for love. Later that day, she thanked him for letting her observe. "You learn by watching," he replied. "That's a good way." They began walking together more often. Not planned walks, just moments that unfolded naturally. A few minutes after a meeting. a short distance between places. These walks became spaces where conversation grew slowly, carefully. Mara talked about her childhood, about always wanting to help, to fix things. She admitted she felt uncomfortable when she wasn't needed. "When I'm useful, I feel like I belong," she said one evening. Thomas stopped walking and looked at her. "Belonging shouldn't be earned by suffering," he said quietly. She swallowed.
I know that. I just...
"Forget sometimes." He nodded. "Many people do." She wanted to ask him if he had ever felt the same way, but she held back. There was a sense that his past was not something to be pulled out by curiosity. If he shared, it would be on his own terms. As the days passed, Mara began to notice how much she looked forward to seeing him. Not because he entertained her or comforted her with kind words, but because he made space feel steady. When she spoke, he listened fully. When she struggled for words, he waited. There was no rush to fill silence. That patience felt rare and precious. She also noticed something else. He never leaned on her. He never asked her for emotional support, never shared pain in a way that required her to carry it. For someone like Mara, who was used to being the strong one for others, this was unfamiliar territory. Instead of being needed, she was simply present. At first, that felt freeing. Then it began to feel unsettling. One evening after a long day of interviews, Mara felt drained. Old memories crept in. She thought about the person she had lost, the promises she had made, the way she had given everything until there was nothing left. Her chest tightened as she walked back toward the guest house. She saw Thomas sitting alone near a small fire, repairing something with his hands. Without thinking, she approached. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am," she admitted. Her voice shook more than she expected. He gestured for her to sit nearby. He didn't ask questions right away. He just let the quiet settle. After a while, words spilled out of her. She talked about always being the one who stayed, who sacrificed, who held things together. She talked about how love had always felt tied to pain. "I don't know how to love any other way," she said softly. Thomas placed the object he was working on aside and looked at her fully. His expression was serious, but kind. "Love that cost you your life isn't love," he said. "It's survival mixed with fear." She stared at the fire, tears burning her eyes. "Then why does it feel so strong?" "Because you confuse intensity with meaning," he replied. "Fire is intense too, but it burns." His words weren't harsh. They weren't meant to correct her. They were simply true. That night, Mara lay awake for hours. His voice echoed in her mind. She realized how much she wanted his approval, not as a teacher or a guide, but as someone whose steadiness felt like an anchor. She also realized how dangerous that feeling could be. In the following days, she tried to pull back slightly. She kept conversations shorter. She focused more on her work. But Thomas didn't change. He remained consistent, respectful, unchanged by her distance or closeness. That consistency only deepened her attachment. She began to admire him more openly, the way he carried responsibility without resentment, the way he spoke about tradition as something alive, not frozen in the past, the way he corrected young people with firmness, but never shame. "You don't break people to make them strong," he said once. "You show them they already are." Mara wrote that line in her notebook and underlined it twice. One afternoon they sat on a small rise overlooking the plains. The wind was stronger there, tugging at her hair. She felt small beneath the wide sky. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked.
I left once, he replied. I came back when I understood why I had to stay.
"What made you understand?"
Loss, he said simply.
She looked at him, surprised. He did not elaborate. He didn't need to. The word carried enough weight on its own. In that moment, Mara felt a powerful sense of connection, not because their pain was the same, but because he had survived his without letting it harden him. She felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest, gratitude, admiration, something deeper and harder to name. She wanted to protect him, to stand by him, to give him everything she had. just as she always did with people who felt safe. The thought scared her, but it also felt familiar. That night she wrote again in her journal. She admitted she was beginning to place him on a pedestal. She told herself it was temporary, that she would regain balance. But the truth was already forming beneath her words. She was tying her healing to his presence. The days passed quietly, but the tension in Mara's chest grew. She knew her feelings were becoming too strong, too dependent, but she could not stop them. Thomas had become more than a guide or teacher. He had become her anchor, the presence she returned to in her thoughts, the person she relied on without fully admitting it. One late afternoon the sun dipped low across the plains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Mara found herself walking toward the edge of the open land, hoping to clear her mind. She had been avoiding Thomas all day, afraid that if she looked at him, if she spoke, her feelings might spill over completely. But fate, or perhaps habit, led her directly to him. He was standing near the fire pit, carefully stacking wood for the evening. He glanced up when she approached, and his calm eyes met hers. The air was still, not a sound except for the faint rustle of the wind across the grass. "Hi," she said softly, unsure why her voice trembled. "Hi," he replied, setting down a small branch. "You look troubled."
I am, she admitted. I
don't know what to do with my feelings." He nodded slowly, as if expecting her honesty. Mara hesitated, then took a deep breath. She had rehearsed these words in her mind countless times. She felt the weight of them as she spoke. "I would die for you," she whispered, almost afraid that saying them aloud would break the air around them. For a moment, there was silence. Thomas's hand stopped moving. He looked at her fully, his gaze steady, unwavering. Mara expected an immediate reaction, shock, anger, relief, affection, but there was nothing like that, only his quiet presence. Her chest tightened, her voice shook. "I mean it," she added. I would do anything for you." You've saved me in ways I didn't know I needed." Thomas finally spoke, but his voice was calm, low, measured. "Mara," he began, pausing carefully, "I need you to understand something very important." She leaned closer, desperate for him to hear her, to accept her words. "A warrior," he said, "does not want devotion that requires someone to give up their life or their well-being. Real strength is choosing to live, to protect yourself, and to stand as an equal, not to sacrifice everything for another person." Mara blinked, trying to process his words. Her mind had expected rejection, confusion, or even flattery. But not this. Not this calm, steady wisdom that both shocked and humbled her. "Are you rejecting me?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. He shook his head slowly. "No, not rejecting you. I am asking you to see that your life has value. That your strength matters. That giving everything for someone else is not the way to love. You misunderstand what it means to be devoted. Love, true love, does not demand self-destruction." Her heart pounded. She wanted to argue, to tell him that her devotion was sincere, that she had always believed the greatest love was sacrifice. But his words carried truth she could not deny. She realized that for years she had mistaken giving, until it hurt for loyalty, intensity for meaning. I've always thought that to care for someone means giving everything," she whispered. Thomas stepped a little closer, but not too close. "Caring for someone means being present, being steady, being strong, not losing yourself. If you give until you are empty, then what remains for you? For them? For anyone?" Mara's mind raced. She remembered all the time she had given herself to friends, lovers, even strangers, until nothing remained. She realized she had done the same thing now, placing him at the center of her emotional world. She had not asked for his guidance or his care. She had demanded it from herself, projecting onto him what she wanted most: safety, grounding, validation. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from heartbreak, but from understanding. For the first time she truly understood what he meant. She had mistaken devotion for self-sacrifice and intensity for love. And in that realization, something shifted inside her. I see, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I never thought about it that way. Thomas nodded, giving her a small, reassuring smile. It takes courage to realize this, to change, to understand that strength isn't measured by how much you give away, but by how much you protect yourself as well. Mara wiped her tears, feeling a mixture of relief and shame. Relief because she had finally heard the truth, shame because she had not understood it sooner. But there was also a spark of hope, a sense that she could begin to rebuild herself, not around someone else, but within herself. For a while they sat together in silence, watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon. Mara realized that being near him no longer made her dependent. Instead, it made her aware of her own responsibility for her life, her own need to grow, to heal, to stand on her own. That night, she returned to her guest house and wrote in her journal for hours. She wrote about the power of words, of presence, of true understanding. She wrote about the dangerous beauty of devotion without boundaries. And she wrote about the quiet strength of the man who had taught her, without drama, without force, that life was meant to be lived fully, not sacrificed. Over the following days, Mara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She still looked forward to seeing Thomas, but her feelings were no longer a clinging need. She listened to his words without seeking permission, without placing her heart entirely in his hands. She focused more on her work, her purpose, and the lessons she could carry into her life after leaving the reservation. She also began to understand the complexity of human connections. People could touch your life deeply without requiring you to give everything. Care could exist without sacrifice. Love could exist without danger. One afternoon, while walking along the edge of the plains, she turned to Thomas and said quietly, "I think I'm starting to understand what you mean." He glanced at her, nodding. "It's a slow journey. Don't rush it." And Mara realized that it wasn't just about surviving grief anymore. It was about learning to live fully, to hold herself with care, to see that devotion could be balanced with self-respect. She no longer whispered promises of dying for someone else. Instead, she began to promise herself life, courage, and growth. The bond between them deepened, but it was no longer built on dependency. It was built on respect, trust, and understanding. And for Mara, that was far more powerful than anything she had imagined before arriving on the reservation. The quiet truth of Thomas's reply remained with her always, that love is not measured by sacrifice, but by strength, presence, and the courage to honor one's own life while honoring others. And for the first time in years, Mara felt free. The days had grown warmer, and the air carried the faint smell of blooming grass and earth. Mara had spent mornings walking through the plains, afternoons listening to stories, and evenings observing Thomas. She noticed subtle changes in herself. She no longer felt the same heavy pull toward him, the desperate need for approval. Instead, she felt curiosity and admiration tempered with respect. Yet, deep inside, a quiet tension remained, a question she hadn't dared to speak aloud. One late afternoon, as the sky turned to soft rose and gold, Mara found herself walking toward the small ridge where she often met Thomas. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the gentle hum of the earth. She spotted him sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, gazing at the horizon. His posture was calm, his presence steady, and for a moment, she simply watched him. "You've been quiet today," he said without looking at her. His voice was calm, as always. "I've been thinking," she replied, sitting down beside him, "about what you said, about strength and devotion." He finally turned to look at her. His eyes were deep, steady, and unshakable. "And what have you realized?" Mara hesitated. The words she had rehearsed in her mind seemed small and fragile when faced with him. I think I understand that giving everything for someone else isn't the same as love. That devotion shouldn't cost your life or yourself." He nodded, as if confirming what she already knew. "It's not an easy lesson. Most people never learn it. They confuse intensity with meaning, and they mistake sacrifice for devotion. She exhaled slowly. I think I've been that person my whole life. Thomas's gaze softened slightly. Many people are, but realizing it is the first step toward changing it. You can still give, but you must protect yourself as well. Mara's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him how deeply she felt, how much she admired him, how much he had shifted something inside her. But fear held her back. Fear that speaking openly might undo the balance she had begun to build. She finally said it, quietly, almost a whisper. I would die for you. The words hung in the air. The wind seemed to pause. Mara braced herself, expecting him to react with surprise, anger, or maybe even affection. Instead, he stayed still. His dark eyes looked at her, not judging, not dismissing, just steady.
After what felt like an eternity, he spoke.
Do you understand what that means? She nodded slowly, trying to steady her voice. I do. I feel that strongly. He leaned back slightly, his hands resting on his knees. Feelings are not wrong, but words carry power. They shape what we believe about ourselves and others. Saying you would die for someone, without asking if it's safe, without seeing the value in your own life, can be dangerous. It is not devotion. It is surrender. Mara's throat tightened. His words were gentle, yet firm. They were the kind of words that could not be ignored. I don't want to surrender. I want to show you that I care. That you matter to me. Thomas nodded.
I understand. But caring is not the same as losing yourself.
You must learn to care without destruction. That is the truest form of loyalty. That is strength. She stared at the horizon, her heart heavy but clear. She realized that she had been drawn to him not only for guidance, but also for the feeling of safety he gave her. She had wanted someone steady in her life, someone to lean on. And in her longing she had almost forgotten the importance of standing on her own. Thomas continued, his voice calm but unwavering. Mara, devotion is a choice, not a demand. You can choose to stand by someone, to care, to support, but you must never give so much that you lose the person you are meant to be. Life is precious. Yours is precious. Protect it. Protect yourself. That is how you honor others as well as yourself. Tears pricked her eyes. She realized that for the first time she truly understood the difference between love and sacrifice. She had believed all her life that love required giving until there was nothing left. That devotion meant suffering, but his words were a revelation. Strength, courage, and love could exist together without destruction. I think I understand now, she whispered. He gave a small, approving nod. Good. Understanding is the beginning of change. It is the beginning of freedom. For a while they sat together in silence, watching the sun slip below the horizon. Mara felt something inside her shift, an awareness that she could still care deeply, still be loyal, still love, but that she did not have to lose herself to do it. She understood that standing as an equal, protecting her own life, and respecting her own needs was not selfish. It was necessary. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the quiet hum of the plains. Mara closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of years lift slightly. She realized that Thomas's reply, calm, steady, unshakable, had given her something she had never received before: clarity. She had not been rejected. She had been guided. His words had not denied her devotion. They had redefined it. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He was watching her, waiting, but not pressuring. The balance between them was delicate but real. She felt a profound respect for the way he lived, the way he taught, the way he cared without demanding. I don't need to die for anyone, she said softly, more to herself than to him. I can live. I can care. I can be strong. Thomas nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. That is the way. That is what it means to be strong. Mara felt a warmth in her chest, not from attachment or desire, but from understanding. For the first time she knew that she could survive grief, uncertainty, and fear, not by clinging to someone else, but by standing firmly within herself. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving the sky darkening with stars. The plains stretched endlessly, calm and still. Mara realized that she had begun to walk a new path, a path of awareness, courage, and balanced devotion. She would carry the lessons she had learned here wherever she went. She would live fully, honor herself, and honor others without losing her own life in the process. Thomas remained beside her, silent but present. The quiet between them was not emptiness, it was respect. It was understanding. It was the kind of connection that did not require surrender. And for Mara, that was more powerful than anything she had imagined when she first arrived on the reservation. That night, as she returned to her guest house, Mara felt a calm she had not known in years. She understood, finally, that the true gift of devotion was not the willingness to die for someone, but the courage to live for oneself, and, in doing so, to honor the lives of those you care for. She knew that this understanding would guide her for the rest of her life, and for the first time she felt fully awake, fully aware, and fully free. The mornings on the reservation had grown brighter, filled with the gentle hum of birds and the soft rustle of grass in the wind. Mara woke earlier now, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The quiet rhythm of the plains had seeped into her bones, calming the restless energy that had haunted her for so long. Her days were still busy with research, interviews, and notes, but she no longer carried the weight of grief that had shadowed every step before. Instead, there was a sense of balance, a quiet awareness of herself and her surroundings. Thomas continued to be a part of her days, but their relationship had shifted in a subtle yet profound way. There was no dependence, no unspoken expectation of devotion. They walked together at times, worked alongside each other at community events, and shared moments of conversation. Yet each interaction was grounded in respect and equality. Mara had begun to understand the lesson Thomas had quietly taught her. Devotion did not require surrender, and caring did not demand destruction. One morning, Mara sat near the edge of the plains, watching the sun rise over the distant hills. The sky was painted in shades of gold and soft pink, the wind carrying the scent of earth and new growth. She thought about the past weeks, the conversations, the walks, the quiet lessons that had reshaped her understanding of life and love. She smiled softly to herself. She had come here to collect stories, to learn about history, but she had ended up collecting a different kind of story, her own journey of healing and awakening. As she reflected, Thomas approached quietly. He didn't announce his presence. He simply sat beside her. For a moment they both watched the plains in silence, the only sounds the gentle hum of wind and distant birds. "You seem lighter," he said at last, his voice calm and measured. "I feel lighter," she replied. "I've realized something important here. About myself, about love, about strength." He nodded, as if he had always known she would arrive at this understanding. Understanding is the first step. Living it is the journey. Mara looked at him, gratitude and respect filling her chest. "You taught me that devotion doesn't mean losing yourself, that caring deeply doesn't mean sacrificing everything." "I've never understood that before." Thomas gave a small, approving smile. "Many never do, but once you know it, you carry it with you for life. It changes how you live, how you relate to others, and how you see yourself." For a long while they sat together, watching the plains. Mara felt a profound sense of peace. She no longer felt the restless need to cling or to give herself entirely to someone else. Instead, she felt grounded, connected to herself, and connected to the land around her. Over the following days, she noticed subtle shifts in her interactions with others on the reservation. She listened more attentively to the elders, not just for research, but to learn from their wisdom. She engaged with the young people, offering encouragement and support without overextending herself. She realized that her ability to care was now stronger because it was balanced, not driven by desperation or fear. One afternoon, while helping with a community project, Mara was asked to lead a small discussion with a group of teenagers. She felt a familiar nervousness, but it was different now. Calm, focused, and steady. She spoke about resilience, about understanding one's own value, and about the importance of caring for oneself as much as for others. She noticed the teenagers listening intently, absorbing her words, and for the first time she recognized that her experiences could inspire others, without her losing herself in the process. That evening she returned to the ridge where she had first whispered her devotion to Thomas. The sun was setting, and the plains glowed in warm hues. She found him there, as if waiting, though she knew he hadn't arranged it. They sat together, not needing to speak. The silence was comforting, a reflection of the understanding they had cultivated. After a while, Mara spoke softly. "I think I finally understand what you meant about strength, life, and devotion. I can care deeply, but I can also protect myself. I can love without giving everything away. I can be loyal without losing who I am." Thomas's gaze met hers. "That is the greatest lesson you can carry. It is rare and powerful. You are stronger than you realize, and now you know how to use that strength wisely." Mara felt a warmth in her chest, not the longing she had once felt, but a calm, steady joy. She realized that her journey here had given her something invaluable, the ability to live fully, to embrace her emotions without being consumed by them, and to approach relationships with clarity and balance. In the days that followed, Mara continued her work, completing interviews, recording stories, and observing traditions. But she also began to plan for the future. She thought about the life she would return to, the people she would interact with, and the ways she could carry these lessons forward. She knew that her attachment to Thomas had taught her not about him, but about herself, the strength, courage, and wisdom she had always possessed, but had never recognized. One morning she packed her belongings, ready to leave the reservation. She walked through the open fields one last time, feeling the wind against her face and the sun on her back. Every step felt lighter than the last. She had come here carrying grief, confusion, and a need for guidance. She was leaving with clarity, peace, and a sense of purpose. Before she left, she sought out Thomas. He was standing near the fire pit, as always, calm and grounded. She approached him, a gentle smile on her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything. For your words, your presence, your guidance. I will carry them with me." Thomas nodded, a small approving smile on his lips. "Remember, Mara, life is precious. Care deeply, but do not lose yourself. That is the path to true strength." She took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of her transformation. "I understand," she said, "and I will live by it." With that, she walked toward her car, pausing to take one last look at the plains stretching endlessly around her. She felt a sense of freedom and possibility she had never known before. The lessons she had learned, the understanding she had gained, and the respect she had cultivated for herself and for life would guide her forever. As she drove away, the wind carried the scent of the plains, the quiet strength of the land, and the memory of a man who had taught her the true meaning of devotion. She knew she would never forget him, nor the lessons she had learned. But she also knew that her life now belonged to her entirely. She could love, she could care, and she could live, fully, fiercely, and wisely. For Mara, the journey had not ended, it had only begun. And this time, she would walk forward with strength, balance, and the courage to honor herself in every step. The plains stretched endlessly behind her, calm and eternal, a reminder that life, like the wind and the grass, moves forward. And so could she.